Allison, let's have another round of applause for Allison. Our next reader is the inimitable Jacob Jack Boas. Jack was born in the Netherlands. He has a PhD in modern European history. His website could be found at www.jacobboas.com. He's also a historian who has written a number of fantastic books that you can find here on this shelf.
Well, I will find them here.
He didn't put that in his bio, I'm just ad-libbing.
They're around. They're definitely around.
He will be reading the writer Menno ter Braak, quote, "My books are me," unquote. Ter Braak was Holland's foremost interwar literary critic. Temporary Illiteracy from 1934, the selection on tap, spoofs the reading habit and that monster of civilization Homo lector. Ter Braak killed himself, age 38, upon Germany's invasion of the Netherlands in May 1940. Let's hear it for Jack. Yeah, no, come up here, but do you want me to move the mic? Please.
Okay. All right. Can everybody hear me? All the way back there too? Okay, you're not lying, right?
I can hear you all the way back here.
All right. So this is a picture of Menno ter Braak, from whose work I've been reading. You can see he's a real intellectual. You can tell by the glasses. I have a pair like this, but didn't bring them because I want to pass something else. So, and the postcard I found here is very apt because it fits in with my reading. Actually, it's in German. It says, your author or book dealer can help you to give up reading. Okay, so Josh told a little bit about Menno ter Braak. He was a Dutchman and Holland's foremost a literary critic between the wars, and he killed himself when the Nazis invaded because he knew that he wouldn't survive. He was only 38 years old. I have his collected works at home. They're like 7 volumes. He was a real institution at the time. He just wrote for a newspaper, a very good newspaper, and a lot of people just bought the newspaper because of his columns. So I've chosen for a reason. I chose a newspaper column titled "Temporary Illiteracy," or in Dutch, tijdelijk analfabetisme. And as Josh said, it kind of spoofs the reading habit, and I thought the bookstore was an ideal place to present something like that, so that you'd probably go home and never touch another book, and probably burn all your books when you get home. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is read a little bit in Dutch for the beginning, and then I'll read the English. Okay, are there any Dutchmen in this over here?
People.
Only by surname.
Oh, only by surname? Okay, that doesn't really count. Okay, so no Dutchman, so I can just do whatever. Okay. Tijdelijk analfabetisme. Volgens de gangbare en in de behoeften des levens gefundeerde begrippen pleegt men in zijn vakantie datgene te laten wat men buiten zijn vakantie pleegt te doen. De klerk laat zijn kassaboeken liggen en beoefent de hengelsport. De zeeman verlaat het schip en beklimt een 3000 meter hoge bergtop. Voor velen is die tijdelijke verandering echter niet veel meer dan een wisseling van uiterlijk decor. Zij kunnen zichzelf niet kwijt en hengelen cijfers uit het water of voelen deining op een gletsjer. Men is nu eenmaal een slaaf van zijn beroep en heeft aan een paar weken niet genoeg om een ander te worden. And I've translated this part, and I've had to abbreviate quite a bit to stay within the constraints of the time limits. So what I just read in good English, I hope, is temporary literacy, the benefit of not reading. Conventional wisdom has it that vacations answer to a human need that keeps us from doing the things we do when we're not on vacation. The office clerk puts away his ledger and goes fishing. The sailor abandons his ship and climbs a 3,000-meter high mountain. For many of us, however, the temporary change is little more than a change of scenery. We have a hard time letting go of our everyday routines. The office clerk pulls figures from the water, and the sailor on the glacier feels the rocking motion of the ocean. We are, after all, slaves to our jobs, and 2 or 3 weeks hardly suffice to turn us into a different person. And of course, he's talking about himself here, as it becomes very clear. And the next heading is A Monster of Civilization, Homo Elector. And so, it behooves the critic, tasked with reading at least 1 and often 3 to 5 books a week, to throw his entire being into the illiteracy mode. And the author of these lines has made strategic moves toward this goal. Reading, understood as the consumption of letters, has an extremely dangerous side. On the one hand, it's an opiate, and on the other, an acquired habit. Opium eventually leads to addiction, an acquired habit to a tic if we're not careful. There are people who approach life almost exclusively through paper and print. Of course, he's one of them. Right? Our society is acquainted with the Homo Elector, who in a world of nomads would be jeered because he can neither ride a horse, nor fish, nor milk. A product of society with so great a diversification of labor that little remains of our former self-reliant creed, but some abstract knowledge of this and that. Homo Elector lives remote from the source of life. In libraries, he breathes the fragrant dust of incunables. In relationship to his fellows, he has gradually been reduced to conventional cliches gleaned from books. A kind of dry pedantry accompanies his comings and goings. His judgment is unfailingly based on an authority found on the third shelf, to the right. The passion for reading has become so jaded as to suppress the element of surprise books are capable of arousing. Homo Elector is not, this to rule out any misunderstanding, necessarily the individual who reads much, but the person who reads the wrong way. One can devour an enormous quantity of books and yet not become Homo Elector. The main thing is to avoid enslavement through immersion in distractions. And so, however dependent on reading, however deformed by books, it is essential to go on a strict diet from time to time, to pretend that there are no books, to live like a nomad in a world of the intellect. It is a curious and glorious sensation, this emerging as a bachelor from a state of wedlock to books, this awareness of having avoided enslavement, of finding an escape route, of living for oneself without the market of ideas and the buzz it tends to generate. And we're going to go skip to the next section. When reading becomes dangerous. We should also dare to face up to the fundamental disadvantages of a reading humanity. I earlier alluded to the phenomenon of Homo Elector as the product of a culture that feeds on the scraps of existence and has unlearned to live like a quote-unquote nomad. It is the corollary of the gospel of unlimited reading, and we better not gloss over it. As soon as we proceed from the standpoint of reading, quote, good books, unquote, is in itself ennobling, we would have to acknowledge the appalling corollary that the person who reads the most good books is the ideal human. I'm going to tell you, so in the abbreviated version, some of the dangers, he says, of reading. Okay, the pros and cons. Just, as far as I don't know, there are only cons here. But anyway, reading leads to superficiality. It enables people to make judgments based on authorities other than their own. Reading paralyzes the power of imagination. It habituates people to certain stylistic formulations, to conventional literary concoctions popular authors copy from one another. Reading leads to arrogance. And he goes on. Reading nurtures snobbery. It gives birth to the false cult of the writer, the poet, the scholar. Let's skip to the next section. Let's see. Okay. So, while on vacation, I regularly saw two young Englishmen spend the day most pleasurably. They sunbathed, joked with the daughter of the hotel owner, danced, sunbathed again, joked again, danced again, and read too. Truly, they read. When they got so bored as no longer to be able to think of any other way to entertain themselves, they picked up a book and amused themselves by soaking up words. Most of the time, that didn't take longer than about 10 minutes. But during this time, they seemed totally satisfied. The books they were reading were by no means good or superior literary works. Serious criticism would pronounce them trashy, and it seemed to me that they never read anything but trash, to judge by the eagerness with which they seized upon every opportunity to stop reading in exchange for something more pleasurable. What could be more cruel, naive, and unrealistic than to try to convert these young men to take a stab at Keats or Shelley? Skip the next one. One book, one person. In the spirit of generosity, as well as theoretically, let's not begrudge the reading material that best suits them and delivers them from the downside of reading that immediately makes itself felt, were we to postulate a universal criterion for something that adds up to a personal relationship. This is not to imply that we should adjust our own standards to those of the sunbathers. This too would be setting a universal standard. Our personal preferences are best served if we don't lose sight of the fact that we're dealing with a personal relationship, no more, no less. Judging the worth of a book ultimately comes down to a decision between that one book and that one individual, not the individual. Were we better at keeping this in mind, it might just help rein in the downward leveling reading often brings in its wake. As well, the reading person swamped by letters in the workaday world and suffering from headaches caused by a surfeit of erudition might just be brave enough to give books a bit of a break on holidays. Thank you. So this is of course talking about himself, because he's got, everybody's got deadlines, knows, if you have to read 1 to 5 books a week and then come up with a column, it's a chore. So it's really about him. Thank you. And if you read English, you can buy this book for over $100. That's the cheapest I could find. With a scintillating title, though.
But is that a collection of his writings?
Great, thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
It's a translation.